Hello and welcome to Measured Thoughts. I'm Dave Reepstein, and I'm excited to be joined today by Vance Lavelle, who is the Senior Vice President of Marketing and Sales and Chief Retention Officer at Sirius Satellite Radio. Did I get that right?
You did, thank you.
Okay, good. It's a long title. But Vance, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Dave. I'm excited to be here.
Well, good. What I want to do is I want to start off and just understand a little bit more about you and your background. I know I've known you for almost 20 years or something like that, but take us all through a little bit of your background and then what it is you do today.
Okay. Prior to working at Sirius, so today at Sirius I'm responsible for the customer sales, or in Sirius we actually speak of that in terms of subscribers, because we think of ourselves as generating, listenership in the marketplace, but unique from terrestrial radio, it is actually a subscription-based business. So in the subscriber business, I manage the marketing and the sales and the service, which is a little unique blend from a marketing standpoint. But looking back in my background, I've been a chief marketing officer in financial services at PNC. And prior to that, headed marketing at Chase, at JP Morgan Chase, in their consumer business. And prior to that, years at AT&T, both in the consumer as well as the B2B space, and had a lot of sales from that background as well as operations. So this role at Sirius actually brings a variety of those roles together in managing what often a marketer wants to be responsible for, which is actually having more of the hands-on customer experience in a service industry.
So to make sure everybody understands Sirius, tell us about Sirius Satellite Radio. It's such a new phenomena and doing so exceedingly well.
Right. Well, we've been actually, our first consumer came into being, actually a paying subscriber in 2002, so it's a fairly young company. We've been in the marketplace now for 6 years, with the consumers, and we're just in the process of beginning a new journey as we've merged with XM radio. So the industries come together, and the service is one that is both in automobiles as well as in homes, or it could be a personal device. We have a whole product line of stilettos that are similar to what we would know as an iPod or MP3 player. And we sell subscription services similar to that of satellite television or your cable television offers, and we do the same in radio.
Roughly how many customers do you have?
We have, with the merged company, about 18.5 million consumers.
And the profile of those, is it tend to be younger?
Actually, it's I wouldn't say it would necessarily skew younger. When you think about the MP3 market and the Apple market in particular, probably a little younger than the marketplace that we have, and skews a little bit to the male population, but because obviously early adopters when you think about the life cycle of the of the category.
So, how would you describe the role of marketing at Sirius? What's the function? What's the role of marketing?
Well, I think, probably similar to most brands, it's all about growth and being the growth engine from the ideas to the execution. And then also...
Let me interrupt you for a second. The growth of revenue, growth of customers, growth of profit, growth...
I would say they kind of all relate, don't you think? They're all interrelated. So first and foremost, thinking about it from a consumer-based perspective. So acquiring the customer, retaining the customer. So goes with that is revenue. And obviously, the better you do it, the more premium you can charge, and your profits go along with that, or cash flow. But
it's easier to try and grow revenue than it is to try and grow profit, because we could buy our way into the market, or you could lower your price and see growth in number of customers. But it won't necessarily translate into profitability.
That's right. A long time ago, one of my great marketing professors taught me that you've always got to be about, ultimately the consumer. And we most definitely, our first and foremost objective is around, growing the listener base, or what we would call the subscriber base.
Right. Okay. And what is marketing's role in trying to accomplish that growth? Is marketing in charge of the growth?
Well, I think it's interesting. In charge is always, it's always a system that's working, hopefully, very collaboratively together to cause that growth to actually occur. So we have responsibility for actually, building the brand value out, working with our partners, because in many cases, the way in which we grow our subscriber base is through our automotive partners, as well as through our retail partners or distributors in terms of the electronics, the consumer electronics component, and then directly with the consumer as it relates to building the subscriber base out. So once they have the equipment, because it does require today, either unique, specific proprietary equipment or internet access, one or the other.
Is this U.S. based or are you global?
It's a predominantly U.S. based target market, and the satellite patterns are predominantly serving the U.S. market, the Canadian market, and then parts of the northern Mexican market, and soon to be announced some other areas. This service is available globally via the internet. But in terms of looking at the proprietary consumer electronics, it's a U.S.-based market.
Are there comparable types of products in Europe and in Asia?
Not of the same ilk, and certainly the content that we have here in the U.S. Is definitely unique, to this marketplace. Nothing as broad or with as large of a base.
Okay. And my understanding is that it really is just an endless array of different types of stations that you can have access to. You don't have to be in that local market. And basically, it's ubiquitous radio.
It is. So when you think about it from our childhood at least, you might be in a car going on a family vacation down the road, and at a certain point, the radio does no longer play. It's the reception, and that's still true today for terrestrial radio. So our service is, regardless of where you are, it is working all the time, no matter where you're traveling from California to New York to Florida. And then in addition to that, the programming breadth is tremendous. We have, as an example, 69 channels of music only, and that's commercial free. No commercials are ever on those channels. And so every genre that you could imagine is available in language. And then we have entertainment programming, talk shows, news, sports as well.
Okay. Talk to me a little bit about your relationship with your CEO. And in particular, what I'm interested in is thinking about the perspective your CEO has about the role of marketing in achieving the company's objectives.
Well, I think marketing is in our firm, at least, it's broken into a variety of areas. So we would think of it in a compartment, if I could, in the discussion. So a part of marketing is around the brand and the advertising and the acquiring of customers. So in that world, that would be a lot. Would be what is our brand image and what are our campaigns that we're working on in the acquisition of customers. And part of it is with our partners. So we actually have a lot of advertising that we do with automotive partners and with our retail partners, whether it's a Best Buy or a Circuit City Circular or something that we might do in store, point of sale. And then additionally, all of our direct-to-consumer. And our direct-to-consumer is probably our largest channel today in terms of creating new subscribers from a retail perspective. And then in addition to that, how do we create attachment? How do we create engagement in the content? No different than some categories, you have all these choices. How does a consumer navigate through the choices and actually find that which is relevant to them and tailored to them?
Right. And the CEO's expectations of marketing?
Is always going to be growth. It's always going to be measured in terms of how we're performing in the marketplace relative to what the financial expectations are that we have and the growth of the customer base.
And your chief financial officer's perspective of marketing and the role of marketing?
Yeah, I would say I think it's similar to that of the CEOs with a particular focus and eye on return on investment, and that's not unique anywhere. I mean, I think that's always going to be the case.
So one of the things I'm always curious about with respect to the relationship between marketing and the CFO's office is returns now or returns into the future. And so sometimes we do some investment to help acquire customers that will pay for itself over time, but doesn't pay for itself initially. And your CFO is totally supportive of sort of those longer-term investments?
Well, I think there's always a balance, Dave, in terms of how much long-term investment one can afford in a plan year, in a particular operating period. And so, not unlike most businesses, we go through that annual planning cycle. So we're looking at what are the tactical plans that we have in place or need to put additionally in place to accomplish the objectives, the financial objectives, and then also what are the longer term plans that may be more strategic, some of which are customer facing and some of which are operating infrastructure. But again, we would put the same hurdles in place, assuming that, that we're able to measure those. And in many cases, it may be over 18 or 24 month or even a 36 month time frame. And for a young company, that's a lifetime.
Right. So we've got some understanding of who Sirius is and maybe I guess the role of marketing. I'm real curious about sort of what measures you use for whether or not your marketing is working.
Well, I think in our case, we look a lot at return on investment, in particular around our communications. And so I think if you look at it overall, the programs, the tactical initiatives that we have in place to acquire, to actually create attachment and loyalty or engagement, to have people understand what the content is or what our programming is and what's available, and then also at the point of maybe it's called the moment of truth when you think about it. When you receive that bill or when it's time for you to renew that subscription, do you take that action to actually stay with us and renew that subscription? So we're constantly looking at new techniques, scanning all the industries, and understanding what's working and what's not working, and then testing those, putting those in place and measuring the return on investment. So it's oftentimes a simple return on investment or a business case NPV.
So you keeping that customer for that renewal, that's why the Chief Retention Officer is part of your title. How easy is it for you to actually assess the return on investment of various different sort of marketing activities you can engage in? I'm going to ask that sort of two ways. How easy is it for you to assess that in retrospect? And could you forecast, and what do you do to try and help you forecast what the return on investment will be?
Well, it's a great question, and certainly with time, we can measure almost everything, right? And sometimes we have the luxury and sometimes we don't, and I think therein lies the experience that a broad-reaching team, which we have at Sirius, is able to hypothesize and actually use past experiences and similar business models to say we should be able to create the following type of return with this particular initiative. And then we put it in the marketplace and determine whether we're on or off. And it will never be perfect, but we get within a stone's throw on most things, I would say, and on some things we're off, and therein lies the learning.
So the holy grail for most companies is getting that return on investment for the marketing spend. How do you do it? How do you come up with that?
Well, I think you look at, depending upon what the device is, the lever that you're going to pull, whether you're dealing with pricing, whether you're dealing with positioning, or whether you're dealing with a particular communication, and you create your hypothesized return, and you literally go in the marketplace and put your statistical test behind it and trial it. Now, in some cases, you don't have the luxury of running a statistical test, so you may actually put something in a loose test in a call center, put it up, attempt it for a week or two, and do focus groups with your agents that are on the phone, with your salespeople or with your service people on the phone, and get a read for what was the consumer response to it, then project out what you think you'll get.
So I have a communications that I'm going to do, some ad. And I run the ad, and then I see sort of what was the change in sales.
Absolutely. Well, you can see that right in the store level. You know exactly what moved and what didn't move. especially from a consumer
And
electronics.
then you know what the bump in the sales were right then, so the revenue you get, but then you project onto how likely is this customer going to stay with us for a certain period of time.
Exactly. And you're looking at your cohorts to understand what's happening over time and with different universes. So that's a little bit of what we're doing inside of marketing. Now, obviously, there's a whole piece that we haven't really talked a lot about that's not, quote, marketing, but it's more consumer-oriented, and that's what do we look at in the voice of the customer? So how are we doing relative to the performance from a consumer's point of view, not just the financial point of view, and what's important in measuring there? And we're constantly holding the mirror up to see what the consumers tell us.
So is that customer satisfaction measures?
A little satisfaction, a little loyalty, and a lot of advocacy, because we like to create not just a listener, not just a subscriber, but a fan. So someone that will become an advocate and actually refer, recommend, if not rejoice about the Sirius programming. And so we're looking at that literally on a daily basis. So we're watching that on a, we survey as most people do, but we have ongoing tracking and ongoing surveying on a daily basis.
Do you compute like a net promoter score or something?
We do.
You do?
We do.
And do you have an assessment of, if we could move the net promoter score, here's what the value is to us, or is it more?
Yeah.
You know, that this is, it's just we know that it's smart to increase our advocacy.
We know that it's smart to increase the advocacy. We would love to have all the math already. You know, it's no different than looking at employee satisfaction and customer satisfaction, and how much of that will predict your loyalty factor. So we're not as sophisticated as understanding all the math and the models behind it as of yet, but we know in not only in theory but in practice with other brands that we see that as a positive lift to the brand equity.
Same thing could be said about loyalty. We don't know how much it's worth exactly, but we know it's got to be good.
Exactly.
Do you have?
We have some loyalty measures that we understand, back to the value in the company. But again, I think models are certainly possible to drive that. I think post-merger it makes a lot more sense to invest in those models, than it perhaps would on a singular platform.
Right. And you mentioned brand earlier.
Yes.
Do you do much investment to affect the brand?
Absolutely. So we're constantly looking at what our awareness level is and what our aided and unaided typical inside of advertising, and then in addition to that, understanding what brand preference is and what purchase intent is, because ultimately that's what you want to know when you're making money.
Right.
Are consumers really going to be motivated to purchase?
And do you measure a brand equity or brand value?
Not in the sense of some of the brands that I've come out of, and they're more mature in their cycle, and so not on the same level as I have in the past.
And I assume you do look at things like the value of a customer?
Sure.
And do you have that for different cohorts, different customer
We
cohorts
do.
have different values because of their likelihood to be retained?
Exactly, and understanding what the value is to the firm over time, and of course that plays a big role when you think about pulling different levers.
Yeah. And do you invest much in marketing research?
Well, I think it's all relative. So I think we're certainly adequately investing inside the research category. How I describe that.
Yeah. And I think I heard you made some reference to doing some experiments. Do you do a lot of active experiments and experimentation to see what works and what doesn't?
We do, and again, this category is a fairly new category, and the subscription side of the business is in particular, a rather young, a young business model, and certainly for this industry, it's brand new. And so understanding what moves the needle and when you have a winner, and to do more of it is critical. And so we absolutely do a lot of testing and a lot of trial. And we do it formally and we do it informally.
Yeah, I think that's what makes a smart organization, is one that constantly is experimenting. Some things don't work. That's valuable to have experimented as well, because you know not to do that again.
Exactly.
And so that's very, very important. You sort of referred to models, and that you don't have all the models that you may eventually get to, and nobody does.
Right.
Are there a lot of analytics being used within Sirius to try and assess the marketing effectiveness?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of analytics, and we're constantly. I would say a good portion of my week is actually spent reviewing performance and reviewing what's occurred against specific tests, and with very widespread participation across the organization. So it's not limited to the marketing team that's interested in that. The cross-departmental team. So yes, we have a lot of analytics, but there's never enough. We're never satiated is how I describe it.
So I'm trying to think about what's customary for the industry and what it is that's really unique. And what I think about most radio networks, they're so dependent on advertisers,
right.
And they're looking at all the, sort of the demographics and viewership. But you're really looking at it simply from the subscriber base. And so it really is a dramatic shift within the industry.
It is all about the consumer when it's all said and done. And we do have advertising sales in our business model, but by comparison to the consumer base, the value of the firm is in the subscriber base, not looking at a traditional model of an ad flow of revenue. So it is very much a consumer business, and looking at customer relationship management and all the techniques that you can bring to bear from other industries inside this newly created industry. Because
it's such a nascent company and there hasn't been this history of all this data, and you're doing things very, very differently, I presume that often you're in the absence of a lot of data.
Sure.
And so you have to make decisions without the data. What's the process you go through in sort of making some of your decisions without the data there to always support you?
I think no different than any other business person is you're looking back on your experience. You're looking back to what's worked in another brand, in another company, another industry, or you're hearing a great idea. It could be at a conference. It could be with colleagues that you're sharing best practices, and you say, gee, that's a great idea. I'm going to bring it in and I'm going to try it here and see if it works. So you just make a gut call on it. You've got a problem to solve, and there's a lot of ways to go after it. So,
Yeah. So we've spent some time talking about sort of what kind of measures it is that you collect and what it is that you're looking at. I'm real curious as to who's the person that is really in charge of marketing performance measurement and assessing whether or not marketing is paying for itself, or the ROI of marketing. Does that ultimately go through you?
Yes, I would say in particular as it relates to the subscriber base, it definitely goes, it definitely lands on my plate. And I think there are additional marketing functions inside the organization. As an example, what we're currently trialing or managing inside of our retail partnerships. A colleague of mine has accountability for understanding what's the return on that, what were the the price points that were placed, we'll say inside of the consumer electronics this week, and what was the return, what were the sales, what were the share positions, et cetera.
Right. How is your marketing effectiveness, whatever assessment you have, that shared throughout the organization? Do you have a dashboard? Do you have a regular, way of sort of sharing that throughout the company, or?
Well, I think in a variety of forms we do. It's not a structure of a marketing council. They're really business councils. And we pretty much have open door and cross-departmental participation in most of those. So as an example, inside of my area, I have a complete review, performance review on a weekly basis. And that is participated by a variety of functions from the finance team, from the decision analytics, the marketing teams, retail, and also from our automotive partnership colleagues. So there's I think a pretty rigorous exploration of where are we intending to be at this moment, and what have we actually produced, and what are the next bets that we're getting ready to pull the lever.
In terms of marketing performance, marketing effectiveness measurement, what's the next thing you need to be doing?
Great question. I would say that being able to more effectively assess our strategic initiatives and prioritize the ones that are most likely to win. And having
what would be a strategic initiative for?
Well, I'll give you a couple of examples. The web has brought so many tools and resources to our hands as marketers. I mean, it really has offered a multitude of opportunities. But likewise, it also can be an all-consuming project. And so how far do you lean into the web and create a completely customizable experience that the consumer can tailor and can go deep, layers, layered in and become an actual day in and day out user, and it becomes, a large, in essence, microsite. And how much care and feeding would that take? So if you listen to colleagues in some other industries that have been down that road and have taken that path, certainly the initial returns of attachment are great. They are fabulous. People really get involved in it. But then what's the ongoing expense of maintaining those?
Right.
And how do you keep it fresh and new? So that would be an example of an initiative. How far do you go? And then how do you keep something fresh and new? So getting it done the first time is not so hard and not so expensive. It's the ongoing care and maintenance for anything you're doing that's expensive.
What's the next big step for Sirius?
I think for us is really taking on the marketplace in new and different ways as a combined company with Sirius and XM together, and looking at some of the the alternative providers that have come through internet as well as through MP3 players, the iPod. And understanding how we fit and how we continue to become more and more relevant, moving perhaps more into the home space. So, we'll see where this takes us.
Are MP3 players a competitor?
Sure, definitely. Any alternative music source or entertainment source is, in essence, when you think about it in this convergence of media, it's competing for mind share. Right. Where do you go to get your entertainment? Where do you go to get your music? Where do you go to get your news, your sports? And so anyone would be a competitor in that space.
Yeah, so it really takes you into a whole new realm of trying to think about your competition. Right. I think that's very interesting.
Yeah. And another thing that we think, also, which obviously is important in a merger, is how do we look at duplicative efforts and, learn from that? How do we take the best of both worlds, but then also begin to actually weed those things that are returning less. So a big part of our effort will be in taking cost out of the business.
What's the most popular program, and what's your favorite program?
Oh, well, I couldn't give away the trade secrets on the most popular. So for me, I'm into Bruce Springsteen. I like the E Street Channel. But we have a lot of popular labels from both brands, from brands as large as Howard Stern, Oprah. The baseball is a terrific brand as well, and right. So we've got a lot of great brands as we look at that. But music is definitely something that people enjoy.
So that's all the time that we have today for Measured Thoughts, and we've been very, very fortunate to have Vance with us. You were absolutely fabulous. Appreciate it, and hope you enjoyed being here with us. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.